Anna Macmillan had lived many lives. War bride, nurse, widow, grandmother. But the one role she never chose and never fully believed was abandoned. In the spring of 1944, amidst the smoky haze and trembling uncertainty of war-torn London, she found herself on a mission of mercy and hope. At just 22, fiercely independent and determined to make a difference, Anna worked as a field nurse at a small Red Cross outpost near Piccadilly. Every night, as the air raid sirens shrieked and the city trembled beneath the weight of bombs, she tended to the wounded and soot-stained survivors. In the midst of this chaos, destiny intervened. It was during one of those long, tense nights that Anna met Henry Sullivan. He wasn't like the others. He was quiet, not shy exactly, but profoundly observant. He noticed the small details that many would overlook. The way her curls defied gravity and refused to stay pinned. The pause in her step as she gathered herself before entering a crowded ward. He wore a clerk's badge from military intelligence, a small detail that hinted at secrets he never fully disclosed. When he did speak about his work, his tone was light and dismissive. "I file things. Boring stuff," he would say with a half-smile that suggested there was much more hidden beneath his calm exterior. Yet, in the midst of all the suffering and uncertainty, Henry was a beacon of gentle constancy. As they worked side by side amid the rubble and ruined hopes, something tender and unspoken began to blossom. Their shared moments were small, quiet exchanges of glances over bandages, whispered words amid the droning of air raid alarms. But in those moments, they forged a bond that defied the bleakness of the world around them. They began to spend time together off-duty, meeting on stolen afternoons when the city's grief was momentarily lifted by fleeting hope. They walked through darkened streets lit by the muted glow of emergency lamps, stopping for coffee in small cafes that still managed to offer warmth despite rationing. Over these coffees, they spoke of dreams and future plans, of how love might be a rare and precious treasure in a time when every moment could be their last. One chilly evening, as the skies burned with the residual glow of distant fires, Henry took Anna by the hand. Under a sky blackened by the threat of more bombs and the quiet hum of a city trying to hold its breath, he proposed with a simple ring and a heartfelt promise. "Let's have something good before the next bad thing." In that instant, the world narrowed down to just the two of them. They married 2 weeks later in a cramped chapel with walls that echoed with whispered prayers. The flowers were scarce, rationed and simple, but the light of candle flames made everything seem magical. It was a moment that, despite the surrounding darkness, shone like a beacon of hope. For a brief, precious period, their love was an oasis. They spent a few blissful days on a short honeymoon near Southend, where the sea and the sky seemed to promise that peace was possible. But fate, as it so often does in times of war, intervened brutally. Just days after they returned to London, the unthinkable happened. On a fateful morning, news came that Henry's office building had been struck in a heavy bombing raid. The entire block was reduced to rubble. There were no survivors. No body was ever recovered. The only communication that reached Anna was a terse telegram, presumed Kia. Anna collapsed in a stairwell, the weight of loss pressing down on her as she clutched the ring still on her finger. In that moment, the world around her fell silent, and even the relentless din of air raid sirens seemed to fade into nothingness. Friends and colleagues, trying to console her, urged her to move on. "You're young, Anna. You have so much life ahead of you," they would say. But something deep inside her would not allow her to let go. There was a quiet certainty, a stubborn intuition, that Henry had not simply perished that day. Even as London began its slow process of rebuilding, its streets relaid, its homes restored, Anna could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. Henry had always been meticulous in the little things. He would scan their favorite cafe for mirrors that didn't belong. He double-knotted his shoelaces, and he left cupboards ajar to ensure nothing had been tampered with. The very habits that had made him unique seemed to hint at a secret he had carried with him. In her heart, Anna began to wonder if perhaps the telegram was a cruel mistake, a misidentification in the chaos of war. Years turned into decades. Anna resumed her work, became known as a compassionate nurse, and eventually married again. though her heart remained quietly reserved for the memory of Henry. Even as the world around her changed, the memories of those brief, incandescent days in 1944 never faded. The old newspaper clippings, yellowed by time and tucked away in boxes, were constant reminders of a love that had once lit up the darkness of wartime London. 76 years later, in the year 2020, Anna found herself mostly homebound, her body slowed by the inexorable march of time, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. She lived in the family's aging cottage in Sussex, a place that held countless echoes of the past. It was on a quiet afternoon when her great-granddaughter, Claire, decided to clear out the attic, a dusty space filled with relics and memories. As Claire carefully pried away a loose floorboard, her fingers brushed against something unexpected. A small box containing old ration books, pressed flowers, and an object wrapped carefully in yellowed wax paper. Curiosity piqued. Claire brought the box downstairs, holding it delicately up to the light. "Isn't this your ring?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with wonder. Anna took the item in trembling hands, her eyes widening as she recognized it. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. This one was his. Gently, she turned the ring over. On the inside, her name was engraved in Henry's familiar handwriting. "To Anna, all my tomorrows. H." And then, almost imperceptibly, there were 3 tiny marks, XXX, etched on the inner rim. The discovery sent ripples through both their lives. Claire, stunned by the significance of the ring, began an online search, posting photos in a wartime artifacts group. Within hours, a reply came from a French collector who recognized the ring as a Marseille piece. He explained that in the mid-1940s, a resistance goldsmith named Émile Braque had been commissioned to create custom rings for couriers, rings that often held hidden messages in their engravings. The collector mentioned that a similar piece was on display in a Cold War museum in Prague. Marseille? Prague? The details were perplexing. Henry had never served in mainland Europe, at least not officially. Claire dug deeper, sending emails and inquiries. Eventually, she received a response from a retired historian at the museum. When Claire mentioned the name Henry Sullivan, the historian paused before replying, "No such listing, but there was a man we believe was British, known by the codename Crane. His full name was Edmund Crane, and he ran message routes through Lyon and Vienna from 1945 to 1951. He disappeared after a final mission near the Swiss border." Along with this, the historian sent a declassified passport photo. The photo revealed a face older and leaner than the one Anna remembered, yet the eyes were unmistakable. Anna gasped when she saw the image. "He didn't die," she murmured softly. "He disappeared." As the layers of mystery unraveled, it became clear that on that fateful day in 1944, Henry had managed to escape the bomb strike by mere minutes. In the ensuing chaos, his identity had been confused with another, allowing intelligence operatives to erase his true record and recreate him as Crane, an operative embedded in Soviet-occupied zones, tasked with dismantling enemy infiltration rings. A CIA memo dated 1952 even noted that Agent Crane had been compromised in Vienna, and that his safe house had been raided. His last known possession, recovered weeks later from a ravine, was a gold ring bearing the 3 engraved XS, a ring that had inexplicably returned to Anna after all these years. Claire traced the ring's journey through old records. It had passed from a nurse's hands, who had recovered it from a church attic used as a resistance safe house, to a British soldier's personal effects before being sold in a flea market. It had been forgotten by many until it reappeared in the attic of the very home Anna had once known so well. The ring, in its silent testimony, had come home. But one final twist remained hidden in the depths of the mystery. At the Prague Museum, in a locked archive that had recently been declassified, Claire and Anna discovered one last envelope. Inside was a letter addressed simply to "My dearest R." In that letter, written in the unmistakable hand of Henry, he confessed, "I told you once I only filed papers. That wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. I became someone else to protect something precious. You were the only part of my life that didn't feel like a mission. If this ever finds you, know this. I made it through the war. I made it through fire and fear. And I never stopped loving you. I only wish I'd made it back in time. See. Anna clutched the letter as if it were oxygen, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. In that moment, all the years of sorrow and unanswered questions began to resolve. Henry had never truly abandoned her. He had been forced into a life of hidden identity and dangerous secrets, a life dictated by duty and the relentless machinery of war. Yet the love that had always shone in his eyes, the part of him that belonged to Anna, had endured, even in silence. The discovery of the letter set Anna's world gently trembling with long-suppressed emotions. In the soft afternoon light of her Sussex cottage, with Claire at her side, Anna slowly reread Henry's final words, each sentence a balm and a sting all at once. She remembered the way his eyes had shone during those brief moments in London, the quiet intensity that promised more than the fleeting days they had shared. Now, after decades of unanswered questions and bittersweet memories, she sensed that the truth was beginning to unfurl, like a long-buried secret finally emerging into the light. Determined to learn more about the man who had been forced into silence, Claire made arrangements to continue the investigation. With the declassified documents from Prague in hand and Henry's enigmatic letter clutched close, they resolved to trace the remaining breadcrumbs of his life as Edmund Crane, a persona crafted out of necessity and duty. Their first step was to follow the trail left in the sparse records that mentioned his activities in Lyon and Vienna. Claire began by reaching out to archives in Vienna, contacting local historians and scouring through microfilm records in dusty municipal offices. In a small archive tucked away in a narrow side street near the old Rathaus, she found a reference in a ledger from 1948, a name recorded among intelligence operatives who had been granted safe passage from the embattled Eastern Bloc. The entry was minimal, a single line noting Crane, operative, liaison for message routes. The date was scrawled in faded ink, July 1948. It wasn't much, but it was a start. At the same time, Anna recalled faint details of Henry's habits. His insistence on checking every reflective surface and the peculiar way he'd left small personal effects behind. These subtle clues, which at the time had seemed like quirks of a nervous man, now took on a deeper significance. They hinted that Henry had lived a life under constant surveillance, not only by enemy forces but by those who might have wanted him to vanish without a trace. His careful behavior was not just a sign of caution. It was a testament to the dual existence he had been forced to lead. Claire's investigation soon led her to Lyon. In a quiet suburb of the city, she met with an elderly gentleman, a former resistance fighter, who remembered a mysterious Englishman who had passed through during the chaotic post-war period. He was always in a hurry, but there was a sadness in his eyes, as if he carried a secret too heavy for any man. The man recalled, his voice hushed as if speaking of a ghost. He mentioned that this man had been seen meeting discreetly at a nondescript cafe near the train station, a rendezvous point for operatives on the run. Although his recollections were vague, his description of a slight scar on the man's left cheek struck a chord with the photograph Claire had received from the Prague Museum. In that image, Henry's face bore a faint mark that had always been overlooked by family photos. Encouraged by this fragment of recollection, Claire gathered additional testimonies from local archivists and even found a faded newspaper clipping from 1949. The clipping, tucked away in a local library's special collections, mentioned an English courier who had been involved in sensitive negotiations between Allied forces and local resistance groups. The article was barely legible, with parts missing from years of paper decay, but the headline, "Mysterious Operative Aids in Secret Exchanges in Lyon," was enough to spark further hope. Claire carefully digitized the clipping and sent it to a trusted historian specializing in Cold War intelligence. Meanwhile, back in Sussex, Anna's memories began to shift from sorrow to cautious optimism. Each time Claire returned with a new piece of evidence, a date here, a location there, Anna felt as if she were slowly reclaiming the lost fragments of a life that had been stolen away by war. Over cups of strong tea in the kitchen, she would recount details of her early days in London, the sound of bomb sirens and the rush of adrenaline as she hurried through rubble-strewn streets. Henry's gentle smile and his whispered promises became vivid in her recollections. "He always said our tomorrows would be filled with light," she murmured, holding the gold ring as if it were a talisman. One rainy afternoon, Claire called Anna with news that sent shivers of anticipation through both of them. An independent researcher in Prague had found a set of declassified CIA files referencing an operative named Edmund Crane. The files detailed operations in Vienna during 1950 and 1951, and one entry stood out. After a safe house raid in Vienna, a single personal item, Henry's ring, had been recovered from a shallow ravine. The memo noted that no body had been recovered, and the operative's true fate remained uncertain. It was as if Henry had been swallowed by the shadows, leaving behind only this golden relic as evidence of his existence. Armed with this new lead, Claire organized a brief trip to Vienna. Though Anna was too frail to travel, she sent Claire off with her heartfelt blessing and a prayer whispered under trembling fingers. In Vienna, Claire visited old military archives and spoke with retired officers who remembered the chaos of post-war operations. One former intelligence officer, now well into his 80s, recalled a daring escape during a bombing raid. "I remember an Englishman with a quiet determination," he said. "They called him Crane. I always wondered what became of him after he vanished." His words, though vague, resonated with the fragments of Henry's story that Claire was piecing together. During her time in Vienna, Claire visited the site of the ruined office building where Henry had last been seen. Standing amid the reconstructed streets, she imagined the frantic moments as the building fell and the world erupted into chaos. Somewhere in that maelstrom, Henry had made a split-second decision, a decision that set him on a path of danger and sacrifice. It was there, among the shattered stones of memory, that Claire's determination hardened. She would not allow the truth to be buried with the rubble. Her journey also took her to a small cafe in a quiet district where whispers of the past still clung to the corners. There, an elderly waitress, her eyes sparkling with recollection, mentioned that many years ago, a mysterious gentleman had come in, always alone, his eyes scanning every inch of the room as if he expected someone to appear. "He never stayed long," the waitress said. "But when he left a kind of silence behind him, as if he carried a secret too precious to share." Claire felt that description was meant for her, meant for Henry. By the time Claire returned to Sussex, she had amassed a mosaic of testimonies, documents, and photographs that began to sketch the outline of Henry's hidden life. In a quiet room of the family cottage, she spread out her findings on an old oak table. The declassified files, the newspaper clipping from Lyon, the recollections from resistance fighters, and the diary fragments she had uncovered formed a tapestry that wove together the story of Edmund Crane. A man who had been both Henry Sullivan and something more, an operative whose very survival depended on the erasure of his past. Anna listened intently as Claire explained each piece of evidence. Tears glistened in her eyes, not just for the loss but for the rediscovery of a love that had never truly faded. "He became someone else to protect you," Claire said softly. "Every day, even when it seemed like he was gone forever, he was carrying you in his heart." The room was filled with a sense of bittersweet reunion, a meeting of past and present, where the echoes of a distant war slowly yielded to the warmth of enduring devotion. In the weeks that followed, Anna and Claire worked together to consolidate the evidence. They reached out to more experts, including a renowned Cold War historian based in London, who confirmed that many operatives had been forced to assume new identities after the war. It was common practice, the historian explained, for intelligence agencies to reassign identities to protect operatives and their families. What we see in Henry's case is extraordinary, but not unheard of. His validation lifted a weight from Anna's heart, affirming that her intuition all those years had been right. At the same time, Anna's once dormant hope began to bloom anew. The old gold ring with its engraving to Anna, "All my tomorrows, H and the mysterious XXX," became a cherished relic, an emblem of the love that had been hidden by the ravages of war and the demands of duty. Every time Anna held the ring, she recalled Henry's gentle voice, his determined eyes, and the promise he had made on that long-ago day in London. One evening, as a cool spring rain drizzled against the cottage windows, Anna sat with Claire in the living room. The fire in the hearth cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the gentle hum of a distant storm created a comforting background murmur. Anna unfolded a faded letter from her own personal box, one she had written but never sent during those early days of grief. In it, she had asked a question that had haunted her for decades. If only I could know the truth, would it ease the pain or deepen the longing? Now, with the evidence spread before her, the answer was becoming clear. The truth, as fragile as it might be, was healing. It reminded her that the man she loved had not abandoned her out of indifference. He had been forced to vanish, to protect her, even as his own heart broke with every mile that separated them. As Anna's eyes filled with tears of both sorrow and joy, Claire gently took her hand. "Grandma," she said, "I believe we're getting close. I've arranged one last interview with a retired intelligence officer who was directly involved in post-war operations. He might be able to confirm one more detail." Anna nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. That evening, in a quiet telephone call over a crackling line, the officer confirmed that an operative known as Crane had been compromised in Vienna and was ordered to disappear without a trace. But he added something unexpected. There were rumors, whispers in dark corridors, that after his safe house was raided, he was given a chance to return under a new guise. "I cannot say for certain, but it was said that one day, if fate allowed, he might reappear." Those words, spoken in a low, gravelly voice laden with memories of a turbulent past, resonated deeply with Anna. Fate, it seemed, had not yet finished its work. The whispers of hope grew louder, and the fragments of Henry's hidden life began to suggest that his disappearance was not the final word on their love story. In the months that followed, Anna and Claire compiled all their findings into a comprehensive dossier. With the help of digital archives, interviews with experts, and painstaking cross-referencing of old records, they reconstructed a narrative that was as complex as it was poignant. Henry Sullivan, who had once been the vibrant young man full of hope in war-torn London, had been transformed by duty and sacrifice into Edmund Crane, a covert operative whose existence was shrouded in secrecy. His disappearance, far from being an act of abandonment, was a calculated move designed to shield Anna from the deadly repercussions of his hidden assignments. At last, in a quiet gathering at the cottage, with the soft murmur of spring rain outside and the comforting glow of a well-worn fireplace inside, Anna felt a long-awaited peace settle over her. The truth was not perfect, and many questions still lingered in the spaces between the pages of old documents. Yet, as she looked at the ring in her hand and listened to Claire's steady recounting of Henry's secret life, she understood that love, real, enduring love, had never truly been abandoned. It had been hidden away, carried in every heartbeat, waiting for the day it could be revealed again. That evening, as darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one in the clear Sussex sky, Anna sat on the back porch with Claire, the gold ring resting on her palm. "I always believed you'd find your way back to me," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Even if I had to wait forever, I'd be here." Claire squeezed her hand, her eyes shimmering with tears and hope. The mysteries of the past had begun to offer not only answers but also the promise of closure. In the quiet months that followed, the evidence and memories woven together by Anna and Claire coalesced into a tapestry that transformed a lifetime of grief into one of gentle hope. The dossier they compiled, filled with faded photographs, newspaper clippings, declassified memos, and personal testimonies, stood as undeniable proof that Henry Sullivan had not simply been lost to the chaos of war. Rather, his disappearance was the price he paid to protect Anna, a sacrifice made in the dark corridors of intelligence, hidden behind a carefully constructed identity known as Edmund Crane. Now, as spring warmed the Sussex countryside, Anna's determination and the steadfast support of Claire led to one final quest: to reunite with the man she had never truly stopped loving. With renewed resolve, Claire arranged for one last interview with a retired intelligence officer who had witnessed the murky aftermath of the operations in Vienna. In a modest London flat lined with dusty books and relics of a bygone era, the officer, his voice soft but firm, recounted the final, crucial details. He spoke of an operative known only as Crane, who had been compromised during a daring mission in Vienna in 1951. His safe house had been overrun, and in the ensuing chaos, His true identity had been forcibly concealed. Yet, whispered among his colleagues was a fragile hope that if fate permitted, the operative might one day find a path back home. The words lit a spark within Anna that had long been dormant. That evening, as rain drizzled against the window panes of her cozy Sussex cottage, she sat with Claire in the parlor. The compiled dossier lay open on the table between them, a mosaic of her past and the secret life of Henry. With a quivering hand, Anna turned the gold ring over once more, tracing the engraved words and the mysterious XXX on its inner rim. In that moment, she felt the echo of Henry's promise, the silent vow that had endured even when the world believed him lost. "He's still out there," she whispered. "I know he is." Emboldened by this revelation, Claire began planning a journey that might finally bring Henry back into Anna's life. With the guidance of experts and a few well-placed contacts in the intelligence community, Claire discovered that an old safe house in the Swiss Alps, near the very border mentioned in some of the declassified files, had been used during the early 1950s to house operatives in limbo. The records were sparse, but a faded address emerged. A secluded chalet in the village of Luc, tucked away among snow-dusted peaks. Though it had been long abandoned, it was said that a former operative had once taken refuge there, a man whose very presence had been whispered about in secret circles. With Anna's blessing and Claire's unwavering support, they arranged for a short trip to Switzerland. Anna, frail but determined, was escorted by Claire and a caring friend from the local community who had once been a nurse at the Sussex cottage. They flew into Geneva and then took a scenic train ride through rugged landscapes that shifted from lush valleys to high alpine peaks. Throughout the journey, Anna's eyes sparkled with a mixture of trepidation and hope, a feeling that somehow, after all these years, she might finally see Henry once more. In Luc, the village appeared almost untouched by time. Quaint stone houses and narrow, winding lanes gave the place an air of quiet permanence. Claire, carrying the dossier and several carefully gathered documents, led Anna to the outskirts of the village, where the old chalet stood in silent vigil against the towering mountains. Its wooden facade was weathered but sturdy, windows dark and shuttered as if guarding secrets within. At the door, they were met by a kindly, elderly woman named Ingrid, who had been the chalet's caretaker for many years. Ingrid's eyes softened as she saw the determined faces of the visitors. "I haven't seen visitors here in a long while," she said gently. "What brings you to this old place?" Claire carefully explained their search, a quest to uncover the truth about Henry Sullivan, also known as Edmund Crane, and to find any trace of his final whereabouts. Ingrid listened intently, her expression shifting as memories stirred. "I remember," she said slowly, "a man who would come here, sometimes late at night, with a heavy look and a kind smile. He kept to himself mostly, but I could see the love in his eyes when he glanced at the photograph he carried. He used to leave a small note with a key, saying he'd return when the time was right." Her voice faltered, and she added, "I always thought that was just a dream, a fantasy of a better tomorrow." Intrigued, Claire asked Ingrid if she still had any of those notes or any record of that man's visits. After a moment's hesitation, Ingrid led them to a small, dusty cupboard in the corner of the main room. Inside, wrapped in a faded blue scarf, lay a bundle of handwritten notes on thin paper, yellowed with age. Claire carefully unfolded one of them. The handwriting was delicate and precise. Henry's handwriting, unmistakably, though softened by years. The note read, "My dearest R, I will return to you when the world is kinder. Until then, know that my heart is ever with you. C." A chill of both sorrow and warmth passed through Anna as she recognized the familiar cadence of Henry's words. Ingrid's eyes shone with quiet emotion. "I kept these safe, as a reminder that hope never dies," she said softly. "I always believed that if fate was kind, you would be reunited." Anna's voice trembled as she thanked Ingrid. For the first time in decades, the fragments of the past seemed to converge into a promise of reconciliation. That night, in a modest guest room of the chalet, Anna and Claire pored over the notes and the dossier. Outside, the Swiss Alps loomed like silent guardians of secrets and lost time. Anna's mind drifted back to the days of war, of dark nights, of hurried whispers and clandestine meetings. Yet in those memories, there was also the light of a love that had endured. She clutched the ring in her hand, feeling its weight as a tangible link to Henry's promise. All my tomorrows. The following morning, as a gentle mist rolled over the mountain slopes, Claire and Anna set out to explore the area around the chalet. Their goal was simple: to search for any trace that might indicate Henry had once returned to Luke. They wandered along narrow footpaths, past alpine meadows and over a small brook, until they came to a clearing. There, partially hidden by wildflowers and low hedges, stood a small wooden bench facing a panoramic view of the valley below. On the bench lay a folded piece of paper, its edges frayed by weather. With trembling fingers, Claire picked it up and unfolded it. It was a note in the same careful handwriting. "For Anna, my love, if you find this, know that I am always with you." There was no signature, but the familiar C at the bottom was all the confirmation they needed. Tears welled in Anna's eyes as she read the note aloud. In that clearing, high above the bustle of the modern world, she felt the weight of decades lift from her heart. The evidence was irrefutable. Henry had not been truly lost. He had vanished to protect her, to shield her from the perils of a world gone mad with war and secrets. And now, here in the serene stillness of the Swiss countryside, his quiet messages had been left like breadcrumbs, guiding her back to him. Emboldened by this final discovery, Claire helped Anna prepare for the journey home. The time had come for Anna to return to Sussex, carrying with her the precious relics of a love that had withstood the ravages of time. On the train ride back, as the rolling hills of Switzerland gave way to the sprawling landscapes of Western Europe, Anna sat quietly by the window, the gold ring resting on her palm. Each flash of light, each shift in the scenery, felt like a promise of new tomorrows. Back in Sussex, the family cottage, though aged, seemed to welcome Anna with open arms. The garden, with its patchwork of wildflowers and carefully tended beds, whispered memories of the past. Over the following weeks, Anna carefully organized the treasures from her journey, the notes, the dossier, and the final scrap of evidence from the chalet. With Claire's assistance, she compiled a memoir of sorts, a record of her long search and the ultimate discovery of the truth about Henry. In the quiet evenings, as she sat in her favorite armchair by the window, Anna would hold the ring and read the old letters, each one a testament to a love that had endured despite the odds. Then came a day that seemed to burst forth with the promise of a new beginning. It was a bright spring morning when the telephone rang. Anna, who had long since grown accustomed to the quiet, hesitantly answered. On the other end was a warm, familiar voice, clear and gentle. "Anna, this is David. I work with the archives at the museum in Prague. I believe we found additional records regarding Edmund Crane. May I speak with you about them?" Anna's heart skipped a beat. After a brief conversation, David explained that the museum had uncovered a series of photographs taken during a reunion ceremony held in secret for operatives who had been given a chance to return under new identities. Among the photographs was one of a man whose eyes held a familiar softness, Henry's eyes. David invited Anna to visit the museum in Prague, promising that this new evidence could shed further light on Henry's fate. Though the prospect of another journey was daunting at her age, Anna's heart was filled with a quiet excitement. With Claire's encouragement and careful planning, Anna agreed to make the trip. In Prague, the museum, housed in a stately old building with marble halls and soft, filtered light, was filled with relics of a bygone era. David led Anna through an exhibit dedicated to Cold War intelligence, where, amid rows of declassified documents and carefully restored photographs, a large display case caught her eye. Inside were several framed photos, one of which showed an older man in a modest suit standing beside a crowd of operatives at what appeared to be a private ceremony. The caption read, "Reunited. A secret farewell to an operative once known as Edmund Crane." Anna's breath caught. The man in the photograph bore an uncanny resemblance to Henry, the same gentle eyes, the same quietly determined smile. Tears of joyful disbelief streamed down Anna's face. David explained that after many years in hiding, several operatives had been quietly reintegrated into civilian life. The photograph, along with other documents, confirmed that Henry had indeed been given a second chance. A chance to live out his days in peace, away from the perils of espionage. Although his identity as Crane had been erased from official records, his true self had always been Henry Sullivan, a man who had chosen love over duty whenever possible, even if it meant disappearing from the world he had known. In that moment, as Anna stood before the display, she felt a profound sense of closure. The decades of unanswered questions, the long, aching wait, and the fear that Henry had truly abandoned her were finally laid to rest. She realized that his disappearance was not an act of desertion but a sacrificial act of protection, a decision made in the midst of war and uncertainty. And now, with the truth shining clear as day, Anna understood that their love had been resilient enough to span even the longest silence. After the visit, Anna returned to Sussex with a lightness in her heart that she had not felt in a lifetime. In the following weeks, family and friends gathered at the cottage to celebrate this newfound truth. A small ceremony was held in the garden, where Claire read excerpts from Anna's memoir and shared the story of her relentless search for answers. The gold ring, still gleaming with its secret inscription, was placed in a glass case alongside the letters and photographs from Prague. A plaque was affixed nearby, dedicating the display in memory of Henry Sullivan, husband, protector, and messenger of enduring love. The exhibit soon attracted visitors from near and far, all moved by the tale of a love that had been hidden by duty and war, yet had ultimately prevailed. Anna, though advanced in years, took quiet pride in knowing that her story, and Henry's, had inspired others to believe in the power of love and the importance of truth. Every time she sat in her rocking chair by the window, she could see the garden blooming in vibrant colors, a living testament to the promise of tomorrow that Henry had once made. Over the next few months, Anna continued to live her days in peaceful contentment. She enjoyed long afternoons with Claire, recounting memories of the past and sharing hopes for the future. She even started a small scrapbook, documenting the journey of rediscovery, with clippings and photos that spanned from war-torn London to the snowy peaks of the Swiss Alps and the storied streets of Prague. Each page was a celebration of resilience and the unyielding power of love. One clear morning, as the Sussex sun bathed the cottage in golden light, Anna sat with Claire in the garden. The scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers filled the air. Anna gently slipped on the gold ring on her finger, the same ring that had once been Henry's, now a cherished heirloom of truth and promise. With a soft smile, she said, "I spent so many years waiting for you, Henry. I never stopped believing that you'd come back to me." Though she knew that the man she had loved was far beyond her reach, his spirit lived on in every gentle breeze and every warm ray of sunlight that touched her face. In those final days, Anna's heart was light. She had learned that love, real, enduring love, was not measured by the hours spent together but by the strength of the bond that persisted through absence and silence. And as the days grew shorter and the light in the garden deepened into a gentle dusk, Anna embraced the truth that Henry's sacrifice had not been in vain. His hidden life, his secret missions, had all been part of a greater promise, to keep her safe, to protect the love they shared from the ravages of a world at war. When Anna eventually passed, it was a quiet moment in her sleep, with the golden ring and the letter resting close by, a final testament to a love that had defied time. The family, led by a tearful yet resolute Claire, celebrated her life with a memorial that honored both the pain of the past and the triumph of truth. At her service, Claire spoke not of perfect endings but of journeys, of how Anna had chosen to live in the light of a love that had always been with her, even when it was hidden. In the years that followed, the museum in Prague continued to share Henry's story with new generations. The display of the two rings, side by side under soft lights, became a symbol of hope and the belief that even in the darkest of times, love leaves traces that can guide us home. Visitors would pause, reading the plaque that recalled Henry Sullivan's secret life as Edmund Crane, a life of sacrifice and of hidden promises kept in the quiet corners of history. And back in Sussex, the garden of Anna's cottage blossomed year after year, nurtured by the memory of a war that had nearly torn everything apart, yet had also given rise to a love that transcended time and duty. Every spring, as new flowers unfurled beneath the gentle kiss of the sun. The legacy of Anna and Henry was celebrated, a reminder that love, when it is real, never truly abandons us. For Anna Macmillan, the truth had been a long journey, a path marked by sorrow and hope, loss and renewal. In the end, she found that the man she had believed abandoned her had only been hidden away, working silently to ensure that she would live a life free from further harm. His sacrifice, his secret identity, had all served to protect the light in her heart. And as the golden ring gleamed in the morning light, it spoke of tomorrows filled with promise. A promise that, no matter how long the wait, love would always find its way home. Stay until the end. What would you do if the love of your life vanished only to return? Not as the man you once knew, but as the keeper of your hopes and dreams? For Anna, that happy ending was not just a conclusion, but a new beginning. A life filled with quiet joy, cherished memories, and the enduring belief that true love, when it is real, always leaves traces that bring us back to each other, even after decades apart.